Hello and welcome to the Sacred Truth channel. Today we're going to dive into one of the most powerful and at the same time most misunderstood spiritual practices, fasting. But we won't talk about fasting in the superficial way many people know. Today we're going deeper, more confrontational, into something that can completely change how you see your relationship with God. The question we're going to answer is simple, but carries enormous spiritual weight. Why does fasting seem to draw you closer to God, even when you don't do it perfectly? Before we continue, I want to ask you something important. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, because this kind of content isn't just meant to be watched, it's meant to be lived. And as you listen, don't just hear with your ears, listen with your heart. Because what we're about to share isn't just information, it's revelation. There's a very common idea that fasting is a way to get God's attention, as if by not eating you're proving something to Him, like a sacrifice that forces God to act. But the truth is, God doesn't need to be attracted. God doesn't need to be convinced. God doesn't respond to performance. He responds to the heart, and that changes everything. So then the question arises, if God doesn't need to be drawn, why does fasting work? Why do so many people report feeling God's presence more, having more clarity, more spiritual sensitivity, more direction during fasting? The answer isn't that God is getting closer. It's that you are becoming more aware of His presence. Fasting doesn't change God. Fasting changes you, and this is the first key you need to understand deeply. When you fast, you are consciously denying something your body desires. You are saying no to a natural impulse, and this creates an immediate effect. You break the automatic cycle of your life, because most people live on autopilot. They eat when they feel like it, act on impulse, react without thinking, chase immediate pleasure without questioning. And the problem isn't just the food, it's the mindset. Fasting interrupts that pattern. It forces you to stop, to notice, to feel, to reflect. And in that space, something begins to happen. Because when you remove one of the biggest physical distractions, constant eating, you create internal space. And that space starts to be filled with awareness. You begin to notice your thoughts more clearly. You start to feel your emotions more intensely. You begin to see things that used to go unnoticed. And that's exactly when many say, I feel God closer. But the truth is, God was always there. You were just too distracted to notice. And that is deep. Because it reveals that the greatest obstacle between you and God isn't distance. It's distraction. And fasting removes distractions. But here's something even more interesting, and maybe even confronting. What about when you fast the wrong way? When you don't follow all the rules? When you break the fast early? When your mind wanders? When you don't pray as you should? Even then, many people still feel something, still perceive something, still get touched in some way. And that's confusing, because it breaks the idea that only a perfect fast works. And here is the truth few understand. God is not responding to the perfection of your fast. He is responding to the direction of your heart. If there is sincerity, if there is a genuine desire to seek Him, even if it's imperfect, something already begins to align within you. Because God doesn't work only with external results. He works with internal processes. And that completely changes how you should view fasting. Fasting is not a spiritual performance, it's a positioning. It's an internal decision that says, God, I want to seek you more than what comforts me. And that decision alone already begins to transform you. But here is something you need to understand very clearly. Fasting reveals who you really are, because when you remove comfort, when you remove immediate pleasure, when you remove distractions, what remains? Your thoughts, your emotions, your desires, your weaknesses, and many people avoid that because it's not comfortable. During fasting, you may notice impatience, irritation, anxiety, lack of control, things that stay hidden in daily life. And that can make you think you're doing something wrong. But you're not. In fact, this is part of the process, because God doesn't use fasting only to bring you closer to Him. He uses fasting to reveal you to yourself. And only when you see yourself clearly can you truly begin to change. And maybe now you're starting to realize something important. Fasting is not about food. It never was. It's about control. It's about priority. It's about who is in charge. Do you control your desires? Or do your desires control you? And that question goes far beyond food. It touches every area of your life, because someone who can't say no to themselves will struggle to live with purpose. And that's why fasting is so powerful, not because it makes God come down, but because it makes you rise. Rise in awareness, rise in discipline, rise in spiritual sensitivity. And when that happens, you begin to live differently. But there is still something deeper we need to explore, because so far we've talked about what fasting does in you, but we haven't yet talked about what it reveals about God, and that changes everything. But before we continue, I want you to do something simple. Comment below. I'm starting to understand, because this is not just content, it's an awakening. Not every fast is truly spiritual, even if it's religious. There is a big difference between not eating and truly seeking God. There is a difference between external practice and internal positioning. And this is exactly where many people get lost. Because it is possible to fast and still have a distant heart. It is possible to go hours without eating, but with a mind full of distractions, pride, anxiety, judgment, or even spiritual vanity. And when that happens, fasting becomes just an empty activity without depth, without transformation, without real impact. And this leads us to a very serious point. What invalidates fasting is not imperfection. It is the lack of genuine intention, because as we've already seen, God does not demand perfection. He is not waiting for you to do everything right, at the right time, in the perfect way. But He looks at something that cannot be faked, the heart. And when the heart is not involved, fasting loses its purpose. But here is the point that changes everything. Even when your fast is not perfect, if there is sincerity, God works, and that is powerful, because it means the value of fasting is not in its execution. It is in its direction. If you are trying, if you are seeking, if you are fighting your own limitations, even if you fail, even if you get distracted, even if you can't stay focused all the time, there is still spiritual movement happening inside you. And that is exactly what the world doesn't understand. The world values appearance. God values authenticity. And that explains why many people who do less externally experience more deeply, while others who do more remain empty inside. Now let's go even deeper. Fasting reveals what controls you, and this can be uncomfortable, because many times we think we are in control until we are confronted. And fasting is one of the greatest confrontations there is, because it immediately exposes your level of dependence, not just on food, but on comfort, pleasure, routine, distraction. You begin to notice how small impulses control your decisions, how the body influences the mind, how the absence of something simple can generate irritation, anxiety, impatience. And that is not weakness, it is revelation. Because you cannot dominate what you do not recognize. And fasting shows you exactly that. It shows you where you are still being controlled. But at the same time, it gives you the opportunity to change that. Because every time you resist an impulse, something inside you grows stronger. Every time you choose to stay focused despite discomfort, you build discipline. Every time you decide to continue even without desire, you develop self-control. And this goes far beyond fasting. It begins to affect every area of your life. The way you think changes. The way you react changes. The way you decide changes. Because you stop being someone who reacts automatically and become someone who chooses consciously. And that is rare, but now comes an even deeper point. Maybe the most important so far. Fasting doesn't bring you closer to God only because you give something up, but because you create space for something greater. And this is an essential difference. Many people focus only on the sacrifice. I'm not eating. I'm giving something up, I'm denying myself. But they forget the most important part. What are you putting in its place? Because true fasting is not just removing, it is replacing. Replacing distraction with presence. Replacing noise with silence. Replacing impulses with awareness. Replacing the physical with the spiritual. And when that happens, something begins to align deeply. You start to perceive God differently. Not necessarily with intense emotions all the time, but with clarity, with direction, with discernment. And that is far more powerful because it's not about feeling something momentarily, it's about developing a constant connection. But here is something few people talk about. During fasting, you won't always feel God, and that can be confusing. Because many people enter fasting expecting intense experiences, strong emotions, powerful spiritual moments. And when that doesn't happen, they think they failed. But the truth is different. Silence is also part of the process, because God doesn't work only through emotions. He works through formation, and formation takes time. During fasting, God is often not trying to make you feel something. He is trying to shape you. Shape your patience, shape your discipline, shape your dependence, shape your faith. And this happens in the invisible. In silence, in the process. And here is something you need to understand deeply. Spiritual maturity is not measured by what you feel, but by what you sustain. And fasting develops exactly that. The ability to sustain decisions, to sustain discipline, to sustain focus, to sustain faith even when there is no emotion. And that is what separates those who only experience from those who truly grow. But now we need to confront something else. Because so far we've talked about sincerity, intention, process, but we haven't talked about one of the greatest dangers in fasting: spiritual pride. And this is more common than it seems, because fasting, when misunderstood, can become a tool for comparison. A person begins to measure their spirituality by how long they fast, how much they endure, how disciplined they are, and without realizing what was meant to draw them closer to God, begins to push them away, because the focus shifts from God to the ego. And that is extremely dangerous, because spiritual pride is silent. It doesn't appear as obvious arrogance, it shows up as a sense of superiority, internal judgment, the need to prove something, constant comparison. And when that enters, fasting loses its essence. Because true fasting makes you more humble, not more elevated than others. It makes you realize how much you depend on God, not how strong you are on your own. And that difference is everything. Because in the end, fasting doesn't reveal how long you can go without food. It reveals how much you need God. And when you understand that, everything changes. You stop trying to do it perfectly and start doing it with truth. And maybe now you're realizing something important. God is not interested in your performance. He is interested in your surrender. And that lifts a huge burden, because it means you don't need to be perfect to draw near. You need to be sincere, and that is something few people reach, because most people treat fasting as an event, something done for a few days at specific times, with specific goals. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a higher level, where fasting stops being just a temporary practice and becomes a permanent principle. And what does that mean? It means living a life where you constantly choose the spiritual over impulse, where you learn to say no to yourself, not just during fasting, but in every area of your life, where control, awareness, and discipline stop being exceptions and become the standard. Because in the end, true fasting is not just about food. It is about continuous surrender. Surrendering pride, surrendering impulsiveness, surrendering the need for validation, surrendering immediate pleasure that compromises purpose. And when you begin to live like this, something shifts deeply inside you. You stop being controlled by circumstances and start living with intention. But here is something you need to understand very clearly. This level is not achieved overnight. It is a process, a silent, consistent, often invisible process, but extremely powerful. Because every decision you make, every impulse you control, every moment you choose what is right instead of what is easy is building something inside you. It is forming character, strengthening your mind, aligning your spirit. And this kind of construction doesn't happen with noise. It happens in secret. And that is exactly why fasting is so powerful. Because it trains you for the secret place. It teaches you to do things no one sees. It teaches you to continue without recognition. It teaches you to stand firm even without immediate reward. And that creates something rarer, something the world cannot produce. True consistency. And here is a point that changes everything. God does not work only with moments, He works with consistency. Many people have strong spiritual moments. They feel, get emotional, make promises, start intensely, but don't sustain it. And the problem was never lack of desire, it was lack of internal structure. And fasting builds that structure, because it doesn't depend on emotion, it depends on decision. And that is what sustains a solid spiritual life. But now we reach the final point, the point that defines everything, the purpose of fasting. Because you can understand all the principles, apply everything, even develop discipline. But if you don't understand the purpose, you may lose your way. Fasting does not exist to make you stronger than others. It does not exist to make you appear more spiritual. It does not exist to make you stand out. Fasting exists to align you, to align your will with God's will, to align your decisions with higher principles, to align your life with a purpose greater than yourself. And that completely changes how you live, because when you are aligned, you don't need to chase everything. You begin to discern better, choose better, act with clarity, avoid paths that once confused you. And that produces something powerful, direction. And direction is more important than speed, because many people are running, but in the wrong direction. And fasting helps you correct that. Now maybe you're asking, will fasting always make me feel close to God? And the answer is not always emotionally, but always spiritually. Because there are moments when you feel nothing, moments that feel dry, moments when it seems like nothing is happening. But that doesn't mean nothing is moving. It means the work is happening at a deeper level. And it is exactly in those moments that your faith is tested. Because it's easy to continue when you feel something. But it's hard to continue when you feel nothing. And that's where many stop. But those who continue grow. And this brings us to the most important point of all. Fasting is not about what you feel during it. It's about who you become after it. Because the true result of fasting is not temporary. It is permanent. It changes the way you think, changes the way you react, changes the way you live. And that is what truly matters. But now we reach the most serious moment of all. Because after all this, it's no longer about understanding. It's about decision. You can hear all of this, agree, relate, even feel like you need to change, and still do nothing. And that is the difference between those who only receive information and those who truly transform their lives. Because knowledge doesn't change anyone. Decision does. Practice does. Consistency does. And maybe right now you are feeling something hard to explain. Maybe a mix of clarity and confrontation. Maybe an awareness that something needs to change. Maybe a realization that you can't keep living the same way. And this moment is extremely important, because there are moments in life that define direction. Moments when you have to choose who you will become. And this may be one of those moments. So now I want to ask you a question. A simple but powerful one. Will you continue living controlled by impulses? Or will you start living with purpose? Will you continue reacting automatically? Or will you start choosing consciously? Will you continue seeking God only in moments? Or will you start living aligned with Him every day? Because in the end, fasting is not about going without food. It's about becoming someone different, stronger, more aware, more aligned, more prepared. And that changes everything. If this message spoke to you, comment below, "I will live this." Subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and continue on this journey.